Greetings, it's Maureen here on my Professor Agent Scully channel. The purpose of these short videos is to introduce concepts, readings, and assignments for my classes at UMass Boston. Please join me on this short learning journey. Imagine you have just spent a lot of time coming up with your decision. You've weighed multiple factors, consulted the important stakeholders, considered various consequences. You've made your decision. You're ready now to share your decision and to defend your decision with solid arguments. Next slide. In this video, I present a simple but powerful format, the 6-sentence argument. The purpose is to sharpen your critical thinking skills by distilling your argument to its key elements. You explain the context and significance of your decision, state your position and your reasons clearly, anticipate a possible challenge to your decision, rebut that challenge, and close with a strong, clear argument. Next slide. This table shows the format of the 6-sentence argument and the purpose of each of the 6 sentences. 1. The introduction. Set the stage for the audience. What is the context of your decision? 2. Your position. Tell us what your decision is. State your position clearly. Don't waffle. Take a stand. 3. Your reasons. Explain the most compelling reasons. Give 1 reason to at most 3 reasons, and state them crisply in 1 sentence. Please don't resort to a run-on sentence to cram it all in. 1 main reason is fine. The point of this exercise is to have the discipline and the clarity of mind to spell out the most important essentials of your argument in a short, clear, compelling way. 4. The challenge. In reaching your decision, you probably considered the reasons why you might have made the opposite decision. Some people you talked with might have urged you to decide the other way. You've weighed the pros and cons. It's important now to show that you did anticipate possible objections. You can state why a reasonable person might disagree with your position. 5. The rebuttal. And here is where you address the challenge. Do not be dismissive or demeaning or mocking of the opposing position. What you want to do here is signal that, yes, I heard you. But you nonetheless refute the challenge based on your careful analysis. As a decision maker, it is wise to anticipate opposition and, moreover, to show that you have been thoughtful in considering the standpoint of the opposition. 6. The conclusion. You don't want to end on the challenge and rebuttal, so here you simply come back to your position. Give a clear statement of your position. Do not introduce new information, but perhaps hearken back to number 1, the introduction, to restate the context of your decision and why the big picture situates your decision as meaningful and significant. A good conclusion will flow quite naturally from sentences 1 to 5 and not feel like an abrupt statement. Taken together, these 6 sentences form a whole. They make a complete and well-reasoned argument. They are brief, but it will probably take you a few rounds of revision to get the sentences just right. You'll probably want to revise and refine after writing down the first version that comes to your mind. Next, I'll consider an example which I've taken from an article that presents the 6SA method, which I'll reference below. Next slide. The example is about socially responsible investing. Let's set the stage by meeting some key players in the case. Publica is an independent investment institution in Switzerland which manages pension funds for public employees by mandate of the government. Some of the biggest investors in any market are those who manage large pension funds, trying to get the best possible returns for people who will use the money for retirement. At the same time that there is pressure to protect and grow these retirement funds financially, there may be pressure to invest the money in a socially responsible way. That is, getting a good return, but doing so in alignment with values. Publica invests the pension funds of Swiss public employees, including the employees at ETH Zurich, which is a public research university in Zurich, Switzerland. Its focus is on science and technology, and it has 20,000 students. So in the case here, some students have protested to pressure Publica to divest from fossil fuels. Next slide. Just as the students have done at Harvard University and many other universities, the students use their own leverage as stakeholders to the university to request that the university's funds, which are partly built from the tuition students pay, be invested in a socially responsible way. Specifically, they protest so that universities will divest from fossil fuels. The goal is to reduce carbon emissions by relying less on fossil fuels like oil and coal, and to redirect investments toward clean energy, and thereby to reduce harmful effects of climate change. Just as an interesting sidebar, on Earth Day in April 2020, Larry Bacow, the president of Harvard, announced that Harvard University would not divest from fossil fuels, but would instead seek to achieve an investment portfolio by the year 2050 that has net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Interestingly, his reasoning is exactly what we focus on when we use a political lens to see how stakeholders with high power have influence. President Bacow said, quote, "We cannot risk alienating and demonizing possible partners, some of which have committed to transitioning to carbon neutrality and to funding research on alternative fuels and on strategies to decarbonize the economy," unquote. He also acknowledged that some people would be opponents to Harvard's gradual approach. So, as I always say, the context for even a simple, small example case like this one is important to show that the decision is one that has impact. There may be strong opposing arguments, and whichever way you decide, you have to take the opposing arguments into account. Next slide. So now here is the short example case, just an example. Let me emphasize that this is not the case for the homework. Imagine that you are a member of the investment committee for the pension fund Publica. Your mandate is to invest over $30 billion in the best interest of those that contribute every month to the pension fund. Publica manages the pensions of all of ETH Zurich's employees, as well as those of other government employees. Student groups at ETH Zurich have called on Publica to divest from fossil fuel companies, like groups at Harvard and Stanford that have demanded the same divestment. You are preparing for your next board meeting, where the issue of divestment will be discussed. Do you think Publica should divest from fossil fuels? That is the question for this sample case, again, not your actual homework. And what you would have to do is answer yes or no and defend your argument. Next slide. Here is the 6-sentence argument for the position yes, divest. See in red at the top, yes, divest. 1. Publica has a responsibility to engage in socially responsible investing and to promote sustainability for our planet. 2. Therefore, Publica should respond to student calls for action on climate and divest from fossil fuel companies. 3. Burning fossil fuels produces emissions that pollute our planet's air and water, thus threatening the environment and the ecosystem. 4. Critics may claim that Publica is not a political actor, and it should not divest investment assets for reasons unrelated to the endowment's financial strength. 5. However, pursuing investments in sustainable energy solutions will have lower associated risk, but the same performance as fossil fuel investments. 6. Divesting from fossil fuels will be a major victory for the climate movement and for our generation. See how it works? There are a lot of complex factors that you could mention in a case like this, but the 6-sentence argument boils it down to 6 clear sentences. Next slide. And here's the 6-sentence argument for the position no, do not divest. 1. In the context of climate change, Publica and other investors are called on to divest from fossil fuel companies. 2. I recommend that Publica does not divest from fossil fuel companies. 3. Divestment has no proven impact on the viability of fossil fuel companies and therefore does not influence global carbon dioxide emissions. 4. Of course, divestment delegitimizes the fossil fuel industry and may pave the way for political reform that effectively curbs emissions. 5. However, Publica lacks democratic oversight and does not have the mandate to influence politics. 6. Therefore, I argue that Publica should stay out of politics and stay in fossil fuel investments. Note that these are just 2 samples. I've taken them from the article I referenced below. And note that both the 6 sentences for the yes position and the 6 sentences for the no position are well written and persuasive. There's no one right answer. The point for this case and for the assignment for my class is to take a stand and then apply this method to argue for your decision. The skill you're developing is to present a clear argument using 6 sentences of this type in this order. Next slide. I need to give due credit for explaining this 6-sentence argument method to the authors of an article in the journal called Management Teaching Review. I always direct all of you to be aware of journals that are part of the business press. That's a go-to place for the latest issues in business and that I hope you'll reference in your future careers. We business school professors also have journals that we turn to, in this case for management education ideas. Here's the full citation. Julian Köbel is currently at MIT and Eric Jentges is at ETH Zurich. Remember, as I always say, know your sources. They work on sustainability initiatives and on educational pedagogy. Next slide. Well, that's all there is. Now it is your turn to be the composer. Compose 6 lines, just 6 sentences, but using these 6 sentences, you can convey your decision very clearly and compellingly. That's all for now. Thanks for joining me on this learning journey, and as always, be in touch if you have any questions.